Hi everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be using this really fun stencil. This is actually called the Stylized Mandala stencil. To me, it sort of looks like a glittery snowflake, and I love the size of this stencil. It's a 6x6 stencil, and the design takes up the bulk of that 6x6 size. I'm going to be using 3 different greeting die sets as well. I've got the Monoline Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas from CZ Design, and All the Joy. I'm going to be using these color blend sheets. I've got the Holiday Cardstock Assortment and the Pastel Assortment. 2 of my cards today will be using this Holiday Assortment, and then I've got one from the Pastels as well. Since the Holiday Assortment is new, I thought I'd just give you a glimpse at the different blends in this pack. They're really beautiful colors. Something to note about these sheets is that it does have a glossy texture on the top. So it doesn't take ink as well as like a matte cardstock would. So just be aware of that. I'm using some glitter glazes from Brutus Monroe. Now I've got the alabaster on the left and then also the fallen snow on the right. The fallen snow one is the one I'll be using today, and that actually has more of a glitter to it versus the alabaster, which is more opaque. The fallen snow is clear with glitter. So I'm going to be using the color Scarlet on this first one. I've used some blended cardstock from the Holiday Assortment, and I've taped that down to my work surface, and then I've taped that stencil right over the top. I'm using the color Scarlet like I mentioned. I'm going to use a palette knife and just apply this directly over the top of my stencil. This goes on very similar to like frosting a cake, if you've ever done that. We basically just want a very thin layer of this paste. This is actually a clear glaze with a red glitter in it. We want it to go over this stencil pretty evenly. Now, because this paste is clear, but with red glitter, we don't want to take off all of that. We don't want too thin of a layer. So I'm actually going to leave a little bit of a thicker layer over the top of this stencil design, but I'm still going to smooth it out over the top. And as I smooth it out, I will have quite a bit of excess on my palette knife that I can scrape back into the jar when I'm done. So I'm just continuing applying this, making sure I have a nice even coverage, and then I can put all the excess glitter paste or glitter glaze back into that jar. So after I have this one all kind of scraped off, I'm going to lift my stencil, and you'll notice that that stencil kind of moved a little bit as I lifted it. So I didn't get a clean impression on this one. So for these next 2 examples, I'm going to be very conscious of keeping that stencil very still as I lift it from my project. Here's another one of those blends from the Holiday Assortment. I've cleaned off my stencil and I'm applying it directly to the front just like I did before. Now this time, because I'm using the Fallen Snow glitter glaze, which is clear, it's not going to show very much of this design unless I put a little bit of ink down to show a color difference. So I'm using some soft navy ink, and you'll notice that it sort of slides all over the place on top of this cardstock. That's because of the glossy texture of the cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and just put some of this ink down. I'm not going to worry about it being a little blotchy because this glitter glaze over top will hide a lot of that. I'm using a new palette knife, or I've cleaned off my old palette knife, and I'm going to apply this clear glitter glaze right over the top of my ink blended areas in the stencil. I'm going to put that right on top, just like I did with the red one, being very conscious of the fact that I don't want to take off too much of this glitter. And I was worried about it kind of picking up the ink down below, but it turned out to be great. So I had no problem cleaning off my palette knife and having ink everywhere. So I'm going to take off that tape on the stencil first. I'm holding down the stencil really, really still. And I'm going to keep one finger on the stencil as I lift it. And that's going to keep it from sliding around and possibly messing up my design. So I'll lift that up and I have a nice clean impression. I'm going to set this one aside to dry as well. For this third example, I'm now using one of the blends from the Pastel Assortment. I've applied my stencil the same way, and instead of adding ink to my design before I do the paste, I'm going to color the paste with a color of ink. I'm using teal ink from Simus's Stamp, and I'm going to take that clear glitter glaze, or the Fallen Snow glitter glaze, and put quite a bit down onto my palette over on the side, and then I'm going to kind of scrape the surface of the palette to bring up some of that ink. This ink dries very quickly, so it's not going to bring in a ton of that color, but that's okay because I wanted this to be a very pale green shade. I'm going to apply it to my project over here, and as I spread it out, it's just this clear glitter glaze with just a tint of green. I think it turned out beautiful, and it works really well with those colors that are already on this blended A2 cardstock. I'm going to run this over the top, trying to get it as evenly as possible distributed over the stencil. And then I'll kind of scrape off the excess. Now I can't put this back into the jar because I've colored it with that ink. So I'll just clean off the excess on a baby wipe. And then just like I did on the previous example, I'm going to hold that stencil in place very carefully as I lift it off my project. I set that one aside to dry while I did some die cutting with those 3 die sets. I'm using matte gold as well as matte silver for the gradings themselves. And then for the shadow layer or the halo around each grading, I've cut those out of some vellum. All 3 of these cardstocks are from Simus's Stamp, and then I adhered them directly on top of their shadow layers, just using a little bit of liquid glue and holding each die cut with my tweezers. After I had each one adhered, I placed a heavy block on top. I'm using a paper weight, but you could also use some stacked acrylic blocks on top just for some added weight to hold those die cuts in place as the glue dries. Now I went back to my 3 backgrounds and they were not dry, so I did end up using my heat tool to speed along the drying process. And then I'm left with 3 beautiful backgrounds using that Stylized Mandala stencil. I decided it'd be fun to have a little bit of a frame around the outer edge on each of these, so I'm using the A2 thin frames dies, and I'm using the second largest frame, and I cut out the frames with the same color of metallic cardstock that I did for the gradings. So since I've got 2 silver gradings, I cut out 2 silver frames, and then I cut out a 3rd frame out of the gold matte cardstock. I adhered those to my backgrounds using a little bit of glue, and then I put some dots of glue behind my die cut gradings and put those directly over the top. I did adhere these directly to some card bases, and I just used some Tombow Extreme adhesive for that. I just had some prepared folded card bases and put these backgrounds directly on the top. Now, because I wanted the gradings to go over kind of the center area of that design, I did turn 2 of these card designs so that they were horizontal so that I could have those longer gradings going right over the center area of that design. So I placed that down right on top, and then that finishes all 3 cards. These came together so quickly, especially because I used those blended A2 printed sheets. Comes together really, really quickly. I love the glitter effect on all 3 of these, and I think I might do a few more of these for some holiday cards to send off to family and friends. All of the supplies that I used today are listed down below in the video description. They are available over at simusstamp.com. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysStamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.